The mansion was silent, too silent, when suddenly the doors burst open. Sirens, shouting, and heavy boots echoed through the halls as the FBI stormed in. Papers flew, doors slammed, and chaos took over. Agents pulled Anna aside, dragging her to the floor as they discovered stacks of cash hidden in her closet. "Wait, it's not her," a small voice screamed. Simon's face was pale, tears streaking down his cheeks. "I did it. I put the money there." Anna didn't know. But the agents didn't listen. Their eyes were fixed on Anna, and the boy's desperate cries were drowned out by suspicion and authority. Who can you trust when the truth is hidden behind lies? What would you do if everything you cared about was suddenly under suspicion? Before we dive into this incredible story of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and the woman who raised him, make sure to follow our channel for more inspiring tales that touch the heart and keep you on the edge of your seat. Anna moved through the grand Anderson mansion like a ghost of humility, each step measured, deliberate, yet almost unnoticed. The marble floors gleamed under her careful touch, yet no one ever paused to admire her work. She wiped away fingerprints and dust with the same careful patience she had cultivated over years of solitary struggle, each swipe a silent ritual of endurance. At 45, widowed and worn from life's relentless trials, Anna had learned the art of invisibility, not because she wanted to disappear, but because survival demanded quiet resilience. Her hands bore the faint scars of years of labor, skin toughened yet gentle, capable of both firmness and tender care. She often thought of them as the maps of her life, every line a story, every callus a lesson. At home, the modest apartment she shared with her daughter Emily smelled faintly of lavender and bread, a haven that felt miles away from the cold grandeur of the mansion. Here, Anna's strength was softer, yet no less formidable. Emily, just 14, possessed a brightness that defied circumstance, a spark Anna nurtured with a tenderness she had long kept locked away. Each night, after the lights dimmed and the city hummed quietly outside, Anna would sit beside her daughter on the threadbare sofa, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "Do not let their cruelty define you," she whispered, the words heavy with both warning and hope. "Your heart is stronger than their laughter, Emily. Stronger than any walls they try to build around you." Emily's eyes would glisten in the dim light, reflecting the small flame of hope Anna tried to nurture. She saw in her daughter a resilience untested by wealth or privilege, a courage untainted by the scorn of others. The two of them shared moments of laughter that seemed almost sacred, quiet rebellions against a world that had tried to teach them inferiority. The rickety kitchen table became their altar of dreams, homework sprawled across it, sketches and small ambitions coexisting with the aroma of stew and bread. Anna would smile at Emily's questions about medicine and distant hospitals, answering with patient guidance and encouragement, never dismissing even the wildest of her daughter's imaginings. But each morning, Anna returned to the mansion, donning the invisible armor of a servant who could not afford mistakes. Her uniform, neat and simple, felt like a suit of armor, each stitch a barrier against the subtle humiliations she endured daily. The Andersons barely noticed her presence, their attention consumed by mirrors and silverware, by appearances that cost more than Anna had seen in her life. Yet she carried on, polishing the crystal, dusting the ornaments, washing the floors until her muscles ached but her mind remained sharp. In these moments, she often thought of her late husband, of the gentle way he had smiled at her once, the quiet encouragement he had given her to endure the storms of life. Memories of him were bittersweet companions, mingling with sorrow and a strange, stubborn pride in what she had become. There were days when exhaustion pressed down with almost unbearable weight, when Anna's back ached and her spirit felt thin. Yet she moved with grace, mindful not to let the weight show, mindful not to let the mansion notice her fatigue. In her silence, there was dignity. In her invisibility, power. And through it all, there was Emily, a living testament to Anna's efforts, a reminder that love and guidance could shape a soul even when the world refused to acknowledge it. Sometimes, Anna would pause by the window of the grand dining hall, watching the sun dip below the city skyline. She imagined herself walking out one day, leaving behind marble floors and silken curtains, carrying instead the unspoken truth that her life, though unnoticed by the wealthy, had meaning, depth, and beauty. And yet, in those quiet moments, she also felt a twinge of fear that Emily might one day face the world's cruelty head-on, without the soft cocoon Anna had woven. So she redoubled her efforts, whispering encouragements, mending torn clothes without complaint, offering comfort for scraped knees and bruised hearts, always teaching resilience without ever uttering self-pity. Every fold of laundry, every polished handle, every gentle word was an act of rebellion against invisibility, a defiance against the idea that her life was insignificant. Anna's silent strength was not the loud, boastful kind praised in stories or newspapers. It was the quiet fortitude of a woman who, day after day, faced scorn without retaliation, who bore burdens with a gentle heart, who nurtured a child's dreams while keeping her own despair at bay. It was strength forged in shadows, in unspoken sacrifices, in the resilience of love. And though the Andersons would never see it, Anna knew that each day spent within those walls was a testament to human endurance, a quiet triumph of dignity over oppression. She often lingered for a moment at Emily's bedside each night, holding her hand, letting the warmth seep into her own soul. One day, she whispered into the quiet, our lives will be brighter. You will see it, Emily. You will see it because we will make it so. And in that silent prayer, she carried not just the hopes of a single life, but the dreams of a mother determined to shield her daughter from the harshness of a world that often forgot kindness. Simon wandered the halls of the Anderson mansion like a ghost among the gilded shadows. Though only 10, he understood the invisible walls that separated him from warmth. His father, John, was a man of endless meetings, eyes always on spreadsheets and contracts, voice sharp with the authority of a CEO whose attention was nearly impossible to capture. His mother, Catherine, was a portrait of perfection, arranging parties and social appearances with meticulous care, her laughter often hollow, her gaze fleeting and distant. In this world of opulence, Simon felt an emptiness no toy or extravagance could fill. Yet there was Anna, a quiet sanctuary amidst the storm of neglect. She listened to him without judgment, laughed at his clumsy jokes, and never treated him as if his emotions were trivial. To Simon, she was more than a maid. She was the first person in his life to make him feel real. Long afternoons were spent in the kitchen, a place fragrant with the smell of freshly baked bread and simmering soups. He would sketch on scraps of paper, trying to capture the warmth that Anna exuded. One day, holding a crumpled drawing with hands that trembled slightly, he showed her a picture he had drawn, himself standing between Anna and Emily, all three holding hands under a radiant sun. "This is my real family," he whispered, the words almost escaping with the same hesitancy he felt in life. His small voice, cracked with emotion, betrayed how deeply he longed for a sense of belonging. Anna's throat tightened as she looked at the innocent honesty in his eyes. She knelt beside him, gently smoothing the hair from his forehead. "Simon," she said softly, "sometimes the family we need most isn't the one we're given. Sometimes it's the one we choose in our hearts." Simon's curiosity was not mere childhood whimsy. It was born from a longing to understand why his parents, who had everything, seemed incapable of giving him the one thing he desired most, attention. He asked endless questions about the world outside the mansion, about people he saw from the windows, about kindness and courage, as if trying to stitch together the fragments of a life he felt slipping away. Anna answered patiently, encouraging his imagination, praising his observations, and never dismissing his fears. She had an uncanny ability to make him feel safe, as if the walls of the mansion could not touch the warmth she radiated. In these moments, Simon's eyes sparkled, a mix of wonder and gratitude lighting his small features. Sometimes he would rest his chin on his hands, watching Anna move about the kitchen, admiring the careful way she chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, or hummed softly to herself. Her focus, her quiet competence, fascinated him. He began to mimic her gestures in his sketches, trying to capture the essence of her patience and strength though he did not yet know how to translate the depth of feeling he held for her onto paper. Simon's fascination extended beyond admiration. It was a desperate search for connection. While other children of the mansion played in superficial games or competed for toys and status, Simon found his joy in small, genuine moments. Sitting on the kitchen floor with Emily building paper towns, or watching Anna knead dough with an almost meditative grace, he discovered the value of being present, of feeling safe without the constant pressure of expectation. These were lessons the Andersons had never taught, lessons he absorbed instinctively. And yet, Simon's curiosity was tinged with confusion and sorrow. He could not reconcile the contrast between the coldness of his parents and the warmth Anna offered. He sometimes tried to speak to John, asking simple questions, longing for father's reassurance, only to be met with impatience or indifference. Catherine's responses were no kinder, polite yet distant, as if his existence were a minor inconvenience in her carefully curated world. Each dismissal tightened the invisible chains around Simon's heart, but it also strengthened the bond he shared with Anna. In her, he found validation and understanding that the mansion's grand rooms and expensive toys could never provide. One afternoon, while Anna was stirring a fragrant pot of tomato sauce, Simon handed her a small sketch. It was a rough drawing, lines trembling with nervous energy, but the intent was clear. "I drew us," he said quietly, cheeks flushed with both pride and fear of rejection. Anna looked down, her eyes moistening, heart swelling with a mix of protectiveness and awe. She knelt, holding his small hands in hers. "Simon, this is beautiful," she said, her voice a mixture of warmth and awe. "You see what I see. You notice the love that sometimes goes unseen. And that, my dear, is a rare gift." From that day forward, Simon's afternoons became a sanctuary of creativity and emotional honesty. He would sketch while Anna cooked, ask endless questions about the recipes and stories she told, and listen intently to her guidance. The mansion's opulence faded into background noise, the laughter, the gossip, the clinking of silverware. All of it paled before the quiet sanctuary they created together. Through Anna's unwavering attention, Simon discovered a world where he could be himself, a world where his emotions were acknowledged, not dismissed. In these moments, Simon began to understand something essential. Love was not measured by wealth, status, or grandeur. Love was patient. Love was attentive. Love was Anna kneeling beside him, laughing at his sketches, or offering comfort for a bruise or a bad dream. He felt the fragile threads of trust weaving tightly between them, a bond that neither money nor cruelty could sever. And though he was only 10, Simon intuitively knew that Anna was the one constant he could rely on, a lighthouse in the storm of his parents' neglect, a reminder that family could be chosen and love could be given freely. It was a night thick with tension, the mansion unusually silent except for the distant hum of the city outside. Simon lay in his small bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for the familiar hum of his parents' voices. But tonight there was something different. Words pierced through the walls like sharp knives. Catherine's voice, high and panicked, carried across the hallway. "Your money will destroy us," she shouted, the tremor of fear in her tone impossible to ignore. Then John's low, cold reply, "Without this, we are nothing." Simon's heart beat wildly, each thump echoing the terror he felt deep in his chest. He understood only fragments of what they were arguing about, but the sense of danger and instability was unmistakable. His small body trembled as he crept to the slightly ajar door, pressing his ear against it. Shadows of his parents' forms flickered under the light from the office. Papers shuffled. Chairs scraped. A heavy suitcase landed on the floor with a thud that made Simon jump. Curiosity mixed with fear, and he waited, breath held, until silence finally settled like a heavy blanket over the mansion. The anger had dissipated, leaving behind only a haunting emptiness. Simon's small hand shook as he tiptoed into the office, careful not to make a sound. Under the desk lamp, The suitcase lay open, and Simon froze. Inside, stacks of cash gleamed under the harsh light, mingled with folders, contracts, and documents he could not begin to understand. His young mind raced, twisting the scene into a horrifying thought. This money, these papers, were the reason his parents fought, the source of the fear and emptiness that plagued him. An idea, both innocent and desperate, took root in his heart. If he could somehow remove this money from the chaos, perhaps the arguments would end, perhaps the house would feel less cold, perhaps he could protect the small fragments of love he cherished. Simon dragged the suitcase with aching arms through the labyrinthine halls, every footstep echoing loudly in his ears. His muscles burned, yet he did not stop. Finally, he reached Anna's small closet, a place that had always felt safe, a space untouched by wealth, status, or judgment. He placed the suitcase carefully inside, closing the door with trembling hands. If they don't find it, they won't fight anymore, he whispered to himself, the words heavy with a child's mixture of hope and fear. He did not fully understand the consequences of his action, but in his heart, it felt righteous, a small attempt to reclaim control in a world that seemed determined to overwhelm him. Simon sank to the floor outside the closet for a moment, heart racing, eyes wide with both triumph and apprehension. The next morning, the mansion seemed unchanged to anyone else, but Simon felt a strange sense of relief, a quiet victory. He knew he had done something significant, though the weight of secrecy pressed heavily on his young shoulders. Each day he checked the closet, convinced that the suitcase must remain hidden, imagining that if it were discovered, the fragile piece might shatter once more. And yet, Simon's act was not born of malice or cunning. It was pure, naive love. He wanted to shield Anna, the woman who would become his guardian, his confidant, his refuge. He wanted to protect the delicate balance of care and warmth she offered him, even though he was only 10 and could not fully grasp the complexities of money, power, or deceit. In his mind, hiding the suitcase was a heroic act, a way to ensure that the chaos of his parents' world did not spill over into the sanctuary he had found in Anna's presence. Days passed, and Simon carried the secret with him everywhere, a quiet tension threading through his laughter, his schoolwork, his sketches. At night, he lay awake, thinking of the suitcase, of the arguments he had overheard, of the fragile stability he hoped to preserve. He imagined Anna's surprise if she ever discovered it, and a pang of guilt twisted in his chest. He was crossing a line he did not understand, yet the instinct to protect and to act, to intervene where adults had failed, burned brightly inside him. The bond between Simon and Anna, already tender and profound, was unknowingly strengthened by the secret. In his small heart, he carried the weight of responsibility, a protective love that could neither be articulated nor dismissed. The mansion, with all its grandeur, seemed smaller somehow, insignificant compared to the invisible threads of trust and affection weaving between a boy and the woman who had shown him the warmth his parents could not. Simon's curiosity had always been gentle, an innocent exploration of the world. Now it had turned into a quiet courage, a dangerous, yet noble decision driven by empathy and the longing for peace. He had no way of knowing how far-reaching his actions would be, how deeply they would ripple through lives and events, but he held on to one unwavering truth. He had acted out of love, and that love, he hoped, would protect the fragile family he had chosen in his heart. The day Catherine hosted one of her polished luncheons dawned crisp and bright, the sunlight bouncing off crystal chandeliers and silver candlesticks, giving the illusion of a world untouchable by sorrow or struggle. Anna moved quietly through the grand halls, carrying trays and folding napkins with precision that had become second nature. She had learned to glide like a shadow, to exist without leaving a trace, and yet she could feel the weight of the polished eyes upon her. She was invisible to them, yet hyper-aware of every whispered glance, every pointed finger she imagined behind backs. The guests arrived, their laughter light but brittle, clinking glasses and exchanging pleasantries that masked judgment. Catherine, in her immaculately pressed dress, moved like a queen in her court, surveying her domain with cold satisfaction. Anna kept her distance, balancing platters of hors d'oeuvres, her hands steady though her heart was quietly bracing for the inevitable. It happened when Anna lingered near the table, perhaps to adjust a silver fork, or simply because her back ached from hours of labor. Catherine's voice cut through the murmurs, sharp as a whip. A maid should learn to be invisible. The words echoed like a hammer against the fragile walls of dignity Anna had built for herself over years. Laughter rippled among the women, high and cruel, a chorus that seemed to confirm Anna's insignificance. Anna bowed her head, swallowing humiliation as though it were bitter wine. Her throat burned, a lump rising that she refused to release. In that moment, her long years of silent labor, the nights spent soothing Emily's worries, the sacrifices made for dignity and survival, all converged in a sharp pang of injustice. Yet she did not respond. She could not. Responding would invite further scorn, and in this house survival demanded quiet endurance. Behind the velvet curtain in the corner of the room, Simon watched, heart pounding violently in his small chest. His fists clenched, knuckles white, as a storm of anger and helplessness surged through him. How could someone so cruel demean Anna, who had given him more love and attention than his own parents ever had? Tears prickled at the corners of his eyes, unbidden, but his rage held them back. He felt a protective fury, primal and overwhelming, as if the injustice itself had lodged in his chest. As the guests departed, the echoes of their laughter lingering like ghosts, Simon ran to Anna. He wrapped his small arms around her waist, pressing his face into the folds of her uniform, seeking to transfer some of the strength he felt rising in him to the woman who had always shielded him. "Don't let her hurt you," he whispered, voice trembling. "One day, I'll protect you the way you protect me." Anna froze for a heartbeat, overwhelmed by the raw honesty in his words. She bent down to kiss his forehead, the tears she had fought to hold back finally brimming, though she did not let them fall. "Simon," she whispered back, voice thick with emotion, "your heart is brave, braver than you know." In that quiet exchange, their bond deepened, stitched together with shared resilience and an unspoken promise. They would carry each other through the world's cruelty, hand in hand, silently defiant. The afternoon faded into evening, and the mansion resumed its pretense of elegance. To the Andersons and their guests, nothing had happened. A maid had been corrected, decorum maintained, society's hierarchy unchallenged. But within the walls of Anna's consciousness, a quiet revolution had occurred. She had glimpsed in Simon a reflection of the care she had poured into the child over months, someone willing to defend love, even against overwhelming power. Later, in the quiet of the kitchen, Anna prepared dinner with Emily at her side. Simon lingered near the doorway, watching, the tension in his small body slowly melting into a tentative calm. He helped where he could, chopping vegetables under Anna's watchful eye, learning from her patience and care. They worked together in silence, the events of the day lingering unspoken but present, like a shadow softened by shared presence. Anna thought of the courage required to endure such daily indignities, the quiet strength it took to remain composed when the world sought to diminish her. And in Simon she saw a kindred spark, a willingness to rise above cruelty, even at such a tender age. She realized that the greatest gift she could offer him was not protection from every harsh word or act, but the assurance that love and dignity could coexist in even the harshest environments. By bedtime, Simon curled up beside Emily, whispering about the day's events and promising to watch over Anna, to be vigilant in his small ways. Anna kissed their foreheads, her heart heavy yet buoyed by the fierce love that had grown between them. In her chest, a quiet determination settled. No wealth, no cruelty, and no humiliation could sever the invisible threads of care and loyalty they had spun together. She had endured, and they had endured, and together they were stronger than the world outside the mansion's walls. And in the darkness, Anna silently vowed to nurture these threads, to keep the light alive, no matter how cold and harsh the grand halls of the Anderson mansion might seem. The mansion, usually a sanctuary of polished elegance and silent indifference, erupted into chaos as if the walls themselves had been shattered. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second, until the sound was deafening, vibrating through the marble floors and gilded walls. Heavy boots pounded across the corridors, a relentless rhythm of authority and alarm. The air was thick with tension, and Anna's pulse spiked as unfamiliar voices, sharp, commanding, unyielding, echoed through the hallways. Without warning, the doors burst open. Agents stormed in, papers and folders scattered like leaves caught in a violent wind. Doors were flung open, drawers ripped out, and the carefully maintained illusion of wealth and control crumbled in an instant. Anna froze, heart hammering against her chest, unsure if she was allowed to move or if the next moment would hurl her into danger. The quiet dignity she had carried through years of servitude suddenly seemed fragile, almost laughably insufficient in the face of such storm. Two officers approached Anna's small closet, their expressions unreadable beneath the harsh light of flashlights. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized the suitcase, the one Simon had moved, was now exposed. The heavy case was dragged out into the open, spilling millions in cash across the floor alongside stacks of documents and folders whose contents she could barely comprehend. Shock froze her body in place, her mind struggling to process the enormity of the situation. Catherine, ever poised and cold, wasted no time. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes as she leaned toward the agents. "Of course it was her," she said, the accusation sharp and deliberate. All eyes turned to Anna, the silent maid who had swept, polished, and labored without complaint for years. The weight of judgment pressed down like a physical force, and Anna felt her knees threaten to buckle beneath her. She opened her mouth, stammering, "No, this isn't mine," but the sound seemed to dissipate into the air, unheard, dismissed. The officers' gazes were hard and patient, ready to place blame without question. Anna's mind raced, thinking of Emily upstairs, of the little girl who depended on her, who believed that the world could be gentle if only love were strong enough. She could not cry for herself. Her own dignity had always been silent, private. But for Emily, she felt a fierce, protective anguish. She tried to hold herself steady, shoulders squared even as the floor seemed to vanish beneath her feet. In the chaos, Simon's presence was a flicker of hope. He had been watching from the shadows, understanding the danger she faced, feeling the injustice as deeply as she did. "Wait," he shouted, his small voice cracking, trembling with urgency. He rushed forward, pushing past the officers with the reckless bravery only a child could muster. Tears streamed down his cheeks, his young frame shaking, but he spoke with a clarity that belied his age. "It was me. I took it. I put it there." The agents paused, exchanging skeptical glances. John's face flushed crimson with anger. "Stop lying, Simon." "Be quiet," he barked, shoving the boy aside. But Simon stood firm, the raw truth in his eyes impossible to ignore. He had acted out of love, out of fear for Anna, and now the weight of his innocence cut through the tense air. Anna's chest ached, her ribs tight with relief and horror. Here was her little friend, her chosen family, dismissed as she had often been, yet standing tall with courage that outshone her own momentary fear. Handcuffs clicked against Anna's wrists, the cold steel a stark contrast to the warmth she had carried all her life. She felt Emily's absence acutely, imagining her daughter's face as the officers led her away, thinking of the small hands and trusting eyes she would leave behind. She did not cry. Her tears had been stored for years, held like precious reserves for moments when they would matter. Instead, she focused on the sound of Simon's sobs, the name she had carried through countless days and nights echoing through the corridors. It was sharper, deeper than any accusation or humiliation she had endured before. In that moment, Anna realized how profoundly love and loyalty could transform fear into courage. Though she was at the mercy of the world outside, Simon's actions had introduced a spark, a glimmer of hope that would not be easily extinguished. She breathed deeply, drawing on the reservoir of dignity she had cultivated through decades of labor, realizing that even in the face of overwhelming accusation, she could hold on to her truth. And in that truth, she would carry not only herself, but the future of the child who had, without knowing it, given her the first taste of rescue in a world that had long ignored her. The sterile room smelled faintly of disinfectant, a cold, unyielding scent that made Anna's skin crawl. Her wrists throbbed where the steel cuffs bit into her flesh, each movement sending a sharp reminder of the injustice she faced. She sat on the edge of the chair, shoulders tense, hands pressed to her lap, trying to steady her breath. The room was small, almost suffocating, and the bright lights seemed to pierce straight through her, revealing not just her physical form, but the long years of silent labor, the sacrifices she had made for a child not her own, the love she had poured into Emily and Simon alike. And yet, in the midst of this overwhelming fear, Simon refused to be silenced. His small figure, trembling yet resolute, stepped forward with the suitcase's secret still burning in his heart. "It was me," he cried, voice cracking under the weight of both desperation and determination. "I took it. I put it there. I didn't want them to fight anymore. Please, please believe me." The agents blinked, taken aback by the raw honesty in the boy's eyes. Skepticism mingled with a reluctant curiosity, the tension in the room palpable. John's face, usually so controlled, turned crimson with fury. "Stop lying, Simon." "Be quiet," he barked, his voice sharp and cruel as he shoved the boy aside, trying to silence the truth. But Simon stood his ground, small fists clenched, tears streaming down his face, his courage shining brighter than any adult's authority in the room. Anna watched him, her heart aching with pride and fear. He had done what she could not. He had stepped into the line of fire, putting himself at risk to protect her. She wanted to speak, to reassure him, to tell him he was not alone, but words failed her. Instead, she simply met his gaze, silently acknowledging the depth of his love and the magnitude of his courage. In that shared glance, no one else existed, only the bond they had nurtured through quiet afternoons, whispered lessons, and tender guidance. The agents, hardened by years of lies and deceit, began to notice something unusual. In Simon's eyes, there was no deception, no hint of manipulation, only the pure, untainted truth of a child's love and fear. Slowly, they began to listen, pressing the boy gently for details, piecing together the story that had remained hidden from the powerful adults around him. With each word, the puzzle began to take shape. The fights, the arguments, the suitcase, and the boy's desperate act to shield Anna from harm. Meanwhile, John's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. His voice, once booming with authority, faltered as agents started probing deeper into his finances, his offshore accounts, and the intricate web of fraudulent transfers he had spun over the years. Catherine's expression, so meticulously controlled, flickered with panic. Simon's innocent act had not only defended Anna, it had inadvertently exposed the core of his father's empire of deceit. Anna felt a strange mix of relief and awe. Her heart, long weighed down by years of invisible labor and quiet suffering, felt lightened by the recognition that Simon's love, though misguided in method, had been a shield against far darker consequences. She realized, with a clarity that cut through fear, that even in a world built on power and wealth, the smallest voice, especially the voice of a child who loved deeply, could have the greatest impact. Simon, exhausted but unwavering, repeated his story with precision and honesty, answering every question, offering every detail. He did not flinch when John's gaze bore down on him, nor did he soften his words for fear of reprisal. He was a witness not only to a hidden suitcase, but to the truth of their household, the neglect, and the skewed priorities that had left him seeking warmth and protection in the arms of Anna. In that small, bright room, Anna recognized something profound. Courage did not always come from strength of body or status. It came from the heart, from a willingness to stand for what was right even when the world doubted, even when danger loomed. Simon, in his innocence, had demonstrated a bravery that adults often failed to exhibit, a loyalty that transcended fear, a love so pure it could pierce the thickest veil of deceit. As the agents continued their investigation, Anna's mind flickered briefly to Emily. She imagined her daughter's face, her trusting eyes, and felt a renewed determination to protect her. For the first time in days, perhaps weeks, Anna allowed herself a flicker of hope. The boy she had nurtured, the child whose heart had grown under her care, was now her shield as much as she had been his. And in that quiet, electric moment, the impossible felt within reach: justice, truth, and the restoration of dignity for the woman who had carried so much silently for so long. The room, once oppressive, now felt charged with possibility. Anna understood that Simon's voice, small, trembling, but unwavering, had shifted the balance. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she believed that the world might bend, ever so slightly, toward fairness, even for the invisible, even for those who had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. The interrogation room seemed to stretch endlessly, cold and unforgiving, its walls a pale, unyielding barrier to comfort or hope. Anna sat rigid, her wrists still stinging from the steel cuffs, her voice trembling as she pleaded her innocence. "I didn't touch it," she whispered repeatedly, each word heavy with years of labor, sacrifice, and silent dignity. But the echoing emptiness of the room seemed to swallow her pleas, leaving only the sound of her own fear reverberating back at her. Simon, however, refused to be silenced. His small frame trembled with exhaustion, his eyes red from crying, yet they blazed with determination. He stepped closer to the agents, raising his voice above the harsh hum of fluorescent lights. "It was me," he shouted, voice cracking but unwavering. "I put the suitcase in Anna's closet. I wanted to protect her. Please, you have to believe me." At first, the agents looked at him with disbelief, as if a child could not possibly be capable of such clarity or courage. John's face flushed crimson with fury, his mouth opening to command silence, but Simon's words would not be stifled. He repeated the story, every detail carefully recounted: the night he overheard his parents, the fear that gripped him, the desperate decision to move the suitcase, and his hope that by hiding it he could prevent the fights that had become a constant presence in the mansion. Anna's chest ached as she watched him, the boy who had come to depend on her now standing as her savior. She wanted to reach out, to hold him, to tell him that he had done the right thing, but she remained seated, letting him shine in the light of truth. For the first time, she realized that courage, like love, could manifest in the most unexpected forms, and often from the smallest voices. One agent, seasoned and jaded by years of lies and deceit, leaned forward, his gaze softening as he studied Simon's face. There was something undeniable in the child's eyes, pure honesty, untainted by manipulation or self-interest. He noticed the trembling of Simon's small hands, the earnestness of his tone, and the clarity of his memory. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place, revealing not just the truth about the suitcase, but the larger web of deceit surrounding John Anderson. With Simon's confession guiding their investigation, agents began to uncover layers of corruption. Offshore accounts, fraudulent transfers, and manipulated documents were revealed, exposing the extent of John's deception. Ironically, it was Simon's innocent act, born of love, fear, and the desire to protect, that had unraveled the meticulously constructed empire of lies. The suitcase was more than cash. It was the key to exposing the truth, and it had been in Anna's closet only because a child had acted on instinct to shield the one person who had given him unconditional care. Anna felt a strange mixture of awe and relief. The weight of years spent unnoticed, unappreciated, and accused seemed to lift slightly as the truth began to emerge. Her heart, long burdened by invisible labor and silent sacrifice, recognized that Simon's bravery had given her a chance at freedom from accusation, and perhaps even the restoration of her dignity. Simon, exhausted but resolute, recounted the events multiple times, each repetition further cementing the truth. He did not flinch under John's piercing gaze, nor did he soften the narrative out of fear for his parents' wrath. The clarity of his testimony left the agents no choice but to listen. They began to cross-reference documents, trace financial anomalies, and piece together the larger narrative that had caused so much hidden suffering. For Anna, watching Simon's courage was transformative. She realized that love, pure, protective, and fearless, could transcend age and circumstance. Here was a boy, overlooked by his own parents, standing as a beacon of truth, whose actions had the power to change the course of lives. The bond between them, once tender and protective, now shone with mutual strength, a silent acknowledgement that they had saved each other in ways neither had fully understood until this moment. By the end of the day, the room had shifted from a space of fear to a space of revelation. John's empire, so carefully constructed, began to crumble under the weight of Simon's innocence. Anna allowed herself a breath she had not taken in hours, a fleeting sensation of hope that perhaps the world could recognize justice, even if only slowly. Simon's words, spoken with unwavering honesty, had pierced through layers of deception, and in doing so, had given both of them a glimpse of liberation, dignity, and the transformative power of truth. Anna reached out, resting her hand lightly on Simon's shoulder. He looked up at her, eyes still bright with tears, and she whispered softly, "You've done more than you know, Simon. You've given me hope when I thought it was gone." He smiled faintly, exhausted, yet proud, knowing he had protected not just Anna, but the fragile integrity of their shared world. In that moment, both recognized a truth they had always known. Love, courage, and loyalty could triumph even in the darkest of circumstances. The news spread like wildfire, unstoppable and merciless. John Anderson, once a titan of industry and influence, now appeared in headlines across the country, handcuffed and humbled. Images of him being led from his office, the once pristine suits now wrinkled and stained with the weight of disgrace, filled every screen. The empire he had painstakingly built crumbled overnight, leaving his employees in shock, his social circle whispering of betrayal and ruin, and his family fractured beyond repair. Catherine tried desperately to salvage her reputation, attending high-profile events, feigning composure, her smile brittle under the strain of public scrutiny. But the whispers spread like poison. Questions about her complicity, her awareness of her husband's schemes, and her role in the family's chaos followed her like shadows. Social circles that had once venerated her now turned coldly distant, leaving her isolated and humiliated. Simon, 10 years old, bore the brunt of the scandal in ways that money and power could never shield him from. Taunts at school were relentless. Whispers followed him through hallways. Strangers cast pitying, judgmental glances that made his chest tighten with humiliation. The emptiness of his lavish home, once a symbol of wealth and security, now felt like a cavernous prison. Yet amidst the ruin, he found refuge where it had always existed, in the warmth of Anna and Emily. One evening, the boy's solitude became unbearable. He hesitated outside Anna's modest home, the small building a stark contrast to the grandiose mansion he had left behind. He knocked timidly on the door, unsure of how he would be received, fearing rejection but desperate for comfort. Anna opened the door, her face softening at the sight of his downcast eyes and trembling frame. "Can I sleep here?" he asked quietly, the words carrying the weight of loneliness and need. Anna smiled, warmth radiating from her despite the chaos surrounding them. "Of course," she said, gathering a blanket for him. She laid it carefully beside Emily, who looked up with a gentle smile, her eyes full of reassurance and understanding. Simon crawled under the covers, feeling the tension in his small body slowly ease. For the first time in days, perhaps weeks, he felt the fragile security of home, the simple comfort of being seen and loved. As he settled beside Emily, Simon whispered, "Here I feel safe." The words, so small and vulnerable, echoed in Anna's heart. She watched him, heart breaking and swelling all at once, realizing how denied he had been of love in the very house where he should have felt the safest. Yet in this humble space, free from judgment and pretense, he could finally rest. Anna reflected on the journey that had led them here. Years of invisible labor, quiet endurance, and unwavering care had built more than clean floors and orderly rooms. They had built trust, sanctuary, and emotional refuge. Simon's innocence and courage had catalyzed the fall of a powerful man. Yet was their bond, fragile and steadfast, that offered real salvation. In the modest home, love had become a shield, a protector against the coldness of wealth and the cruelty of neglect. Days passed, and the mansion that had once symbolized power and control fell silent. John faced legal consequences, the world scrutinizing his every action, while Catherine fled to avoid the public shame, leaving Simon in a liminal space of uncertainty. But Anna, steadfast and unwavering, became his anchor. Every morning she greeted him with warmth. Every evening she tucked him in with care, creating a rhythm of trust and security that slowly began to mend the boy's fractured sense of self. Emily, too, embraced her new role in Simon's life, not as a passive observer, but as a sister, a companion, and a witness to the quiet courage that had shaped their shared destiny. Together, they created a home that was measured not by wealth or grandeur, but by love, respect, and the safety of being truly seen. Anna watched them, her heart full, understanding that family was defined not by blood or status, but by loyalty, care, and the willingness to stand together when the world threatened to pull them apart. One night, Simon lay awake beside Emily, thinking of the mansion, of his parents, of the empire that had collapsed under the weight of truth. He turned to Anna, eyes wide and earnest. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Anna's chest tightened, tears threatening, as she gently stroked his hair. "You've already saved me, Simon," she murmured. "You've saved us both." In the aftermath of John's downfall, the true power revealed itself, not in money, not in influence, but the quiet acts of courage, the unwavering bonds of loyalty, and the love that refused to be silenced. Simon learned that life's greatest treasures were not those buried in safes or hidden in ledgers, but those nurtured in small kitchens, modest bedrooms, and tender human connections. And Anna, who had carried the weight of invisibility for so long, finally understood that her worth was immeasurable, reflected in the eyes of the children she had protected and guided with unwavering devotion. Anna sat quietly in the small office provided by the FBI, the weight of recent events pressing down on her like the heaviest of stones. Her wrists still bore the faint impressions of the cold steel cuffs, a lingering reminder of how fragile her dignity had seemed just days ago. Papers and forms lay scattered across the desk, offering financial compensation and legal protections in exchange for her testimony. For someone who had spent a lifetime counting coins, scrimping and saving to provide for Emily, the offer was staggering, a chance to escape poverty, to finally claim a life she had only dreamed of. Yet as she looked across the desk, her thoughts went immediately to Simon, the boy who had risked everything to protect her, who had stood bravely in the face of disbelief, who had acted from love rather than greed or fear. He was not just a child. He was a force of truth and innocence, a living testament to the power of courage and loyalty. The thought of accepting wealth or fame while Simon remained vulnerable and unprotected stirred a profound unease within her. Money could never repair what was fragile or heal what had been broken. It could not reward courage or honor innocence in the way that integrity and love could. She remembered vividly the kitchen where Simon had first shown her the drawing of their imagined family, hands clasped under the sun, a quiet vision of belonging in a world that often denied them such warmth. That image had stayed with her through every long day at the Anderson mansion, every insult, every silent indignity. It reminded her that true wealth was not in what one possessed, but in the bonds one nurtured, the courage one fostered, and the love one gave without expectation. The decision before her was clear, though difficult. She could take the financial compensation, escape to a life of comfort, and leave Simon's fate to the whims of others. Or she could stand unwavering and ensure that his innocence was recognized, that the boy who had saved her, both figuratively and literally, would be protected and honored. Anna inhaled deeply, the air in the room heavy with the weight of her choice, and let her heart speak louder than fear. "I will not take the money," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. The agents paused, surprised by her resolve. Simon acted out of love, not malice. "He is just a child who wanted peace. Please make sure he is understood, protected, and safe." Her eyes, usually so quiet and reserved, now shone with determination and the quiet power of truth. "That is my choice. That is my wealth. Nothing else matters." For a moment, silence hung in the room like a fragile bubble, waiting to see if her words would falter. But they did not. Anna's dignity, cultivated over decades of invisible labor, radiated now with a brilliance of unwavering principle. She had chosen integrity over gain, love over convenience, and courage over fear. And in that choice, She had found a power far greater than money or influence, a power rooted in justice, honor, and the sacred bond between herself and the children she had nurtured. As the courtroom proceedings began, Anna stood firm, recounting the truth with clarity and emotional depth. She spoke not only of her own innocence but of Simon's bravery, emphasizing his motives and the purity of his intentions. Her words painted a picture of a child acting from love, not manipulation, of a household fractured by neglect and greed, and of a woman who had devoted her life to protecting the vulnerable despite being invisible to the world around her. The judge, moved by her testimony, listened intently, recognizing the depth of Anna's courage and the gravity of Simon's actions. Her account illuminated the heart of the case, the innocence of a child, the loyalty of a caretaker, and the moral bankruptcy of those who had betrayed that trust. In the quiet strength of her voice, the courtroom felt a shift, the scales of justice tilting toward fairness, toward truth, toward recognition of the invisible and the overlooked. Later, as Anna left the courthouse, she did not carry wealth in her hands, but she carried something far more enduring: respect, acknowledgement, and the quiet triumph of integrity. She returned home to Emily and Simon, her heart full, the children's smiles lighting the small apartment brighter than any chandelier ever could. Simon clung to her, whispering thanks and relief, while Emily wrapped her arms around her mother's waist, both of them silent but profoundly grateful. Anna understood deeply and completely that her choice had forged a new reality, a life not measured by money but by love, trust, and shared courage. For Simon and Emily, she had always been more than a caretaker. She had been their protector, their teacher, their unwavering presence in a world that often forgot them. And now, finally, her truth was heard, her integrity honored, and the invisible bonds of their family made tangible. In that quiet apartment, surrounded by the warmth of the children she had loved and guided, Anna felt a profound peace. She had chosen wisely, bravely, and with a heart that had long endured the weight of invisibility. And in doing so, she had created a legacy not of wealth, but of love, courage, and the unbreakable power of truth. The months following John Anderson's arrest were quiet but profound. The mansion, once a place of tension, opulence, and neglect, now stood abandoned, a hollow shell of its former power. Catherine had left the country, unwilling to endure the scandal and whispers of complicity that followed her like shadows. The life Simon had known, lavish yet hollow, grand yet lonely, had vanished, leaving him adrift in a world he had only begun to understand. But amidst the uncertainty, one constant remained: Anna. Her apartment, modest and warmly furnished, became a sanctuary not just for Emily, but now for Simon as well. She embraced the role of guardian with quiet confidence, never flaunting authority, yet creating a rhythm of safety and love that slowly healed the wounds the Anderson household had inflicted. Every morning, she prepared breakfast with care, laughter echoing softly through the small kitchen. Every evening, she read stories, answered questions, and tucked the children into bed with warmth and reassurance that money could never provide. The bond between Simon and Emily grew with each passing day. No longer defined by social hierarchy or household roles, they became siblings in the truest sense, sharing laughter, tears, and secrets. Simon learned the joy of being truly seen, of having someone recognize his heart beyond the mistakes of his parents or the expectations of wealth. Emily, too, blossomed under Anna's guidance, finding a space where her dreams, once weighed down by poverty and ridicule, could grow freely. Together, they created a home defined not by opulence, but by love, respect, and shared resilience. As the years passed, Simon's inheritance from the Anderson fortune, untouched by the corruption that had once defined his family, offered him opportunities he had never imagined. But his choices reflected the values Anna had instilled in him. Rather than indulge in frivolity, he invested in scholarships and built schools for children who carried dreams as heavy as Emily once had. Each project bore Anna's influence, a tribute to the woman whose unwavering care had shaped his understanding of courage, loyalty, and responsibility. Anna, now older, her hair silvered and her face lined with the gentle traces of time, watched these accomplishments with quiet pride. She saw in Simon not only the boy who had once risked everything to protect her, but the young man who had carried that courage into the wider world, creating ripples of positive change. Emily, equally accomplished, stood beside him, her own dreams nurtured and realized. Together, the three of them represented the triumph of love and integrity over neglect, fear, and greed. The inauguration of one of Simon's community schools marked a moment of profound reflection. Anna stood among the crowd, her eyes glistening as she listened to Simon speak. He spoke not of wealth or power, but of guidance, inspiration, and the quiet forces that shape lives. This school, he said, voice strong and steady, is dedicated to the light that showed me the way when I needed it most. His gaze found Anna's, and in that moment, she felt the invisible threads of her years of labor, sacrifice, and love made visible and honored. Tears welled in Anna's eyes as she watched children enter the building, their faces full of hope, curiosity, and wonder. She recognized herself reflected in each grateful gaze, not as a maid, not as someone invisible, but as a force of guidance, resilience, and love. Simon and Emily, standing beside her, smiled with a quiet understanding. To them, she had never been merely a caretaker. She had always been the light guiding them through fear, uncertainty, and the shadows of neglect. Even in moments of reflection, Anna allowed herself to remember the small acts of courage and love that had built this new reality, the long hours spent comforting Simon in the kitchen, the whispered encouragement to Emily during nights of fear and doubt, the choices made to protect, nurture, and stand firm in the face of injustice. Each act, once invisible, had created a legacy far greater than any fortune or title could offer. As the crowd dispersed and the laughter of children filled the hallways, Anna stood in quiet gratitude. She understood, fully and deeply, that family was not defined by bloodlines or societal status. Family was chosen, nurtured, and protected through acts of love, courage, and unwavering integrity. She had found it in Simon and Emily, and together they had built a world brighter than the most gilded mansion, more enduring than any fortune, and infinitely more meaningful. And so, in the warmth of the modest home that had become their sanctuary, Anna, Simon, and Emily embraced the life they had forged together. A life defined not by wealth or power, but by love, trust, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of a family created in the truest sense. Once invisible, Anna now saw herself reflected in the lives she had shaped, the hearts she had touched, and the future she had helped build. She had always been more than a maid. She had always been their guiding light. As Anna watched Simon and Emily laugh and play, her heart swelled with a quiet joy she had never known. From invisible maid to guiding light, her journey had been one of courage, love, and unwavering integrity. Their story is a reminder that true family is built not by wealth or status, but by care, loyalty, and the bonds we choose to nurture. If this story touched your heart, follow our channel for more inspiring tales of resilience, courage, and the power of love to change lives. Every story brings hope. Every character teaches something about the strength within us all.